turn off the lights, get things rolling. Is that bright enough for you, Phyllis?
It's fine.
All right. Thank you so much for offering to give this wonderful lecture. We're very grateful to you. And you're not going to wear your mask? Okay.
They won't be able to hear.
That's why you're going to swallow the mask.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll get things closed out.
Okay, everybody. I'm Phyllis Kasdan, and I'm going to be giving you a talk about the Catskill Mountains. How many of you have ever been to the Catskill Mountains? Fun place, isn't it? Anyway, there's really more to the Catskill Mountains than the Borscht Belt that you're familiar with. When one thinks about the Catskill Mountains today, especially we as a part of the greatest generation, what comes to mind is the Borscht Belt, or the Jewish or sour cream Alps, as they're often called. Though the history of the resort starts in most prominent, especially to the Jewish people from New York, the Americanization of the Catskill dates back to the 1700s. When the Dutch settled in the Catskills, it was called Cat's Creek, the English translation for the Dutch, for Catskills in Dutch. The area was America's first frontier, northwest of New York City. This area consisted of 700,000 acres of forest preserve in 5 counties: Delaware, Greene, Sullivan, Ulster, and Shawhair. It was the subject of the 19th century Hudson River school paintings that captured the almost godlike majesty of the mountains and landscapes, skies, waterfalls, pastures, and cliffs. The politicians, preachers, and outlaws, musicians and spiritualists, outcasts and rebels, uh, is also America's first vacation land. This is a picture of Henry Hudson. He first spotted the distant Blue Mountains in 1609. He arrived purely by accident, but made the foolish mistake by moving on. But before he sailed on, he stopped to look at the land. At that time, the Catskills were inhabited by 2 to 3,000 Mohican Native Americans. The Mohicans were friendly, welcoming, and eager to trade. Hudson's sail from Manhattan upriver did serve as a catalyst for what would become a lucrative fur trading business. In 1614, a Dutch trading post was founded. In 1653, the city of Kingston was settled, and other villages would be developed over the next century. I found it particularly interesting that recently an article appeared in the Democrat and Chronicle about a dig, an archaeological dig, that was currently in progress in Kingston, New York, around the old Dutch church. The would-be archaeologists are searching for the remains of their ancestors. So, how did the Catskills change from uh, from being noted for its literature and landscape art to a rich man's playground? On the evening of September 18th, 1822, a large number of elite ladies and gentlemen from Albany, Columbia, Dutchess, and Greene counties gathered in a ballroom located on a secluded glen. The rural ball, as it was called, included dancing to music provided by fiddlers. The ball started at 7 p.m., and at 2 a.m., the group retired to their lodgings. But of course, the men and women were in different areas. The owners of the Catskill, wait a minute. After the ball, they formed the Catskill Mountain Association. What's this picture? You know what? I got all messed up here. Oh, let's see. In 1664, the British, eager to expand their influence over the American continent, drove out the Dutch and influenced over a century of colonial rule. The early settlers left their stamp on America. The development of the Catskills officially began on April 20th, 1708, when Johannes Hardenberg, an enterprising speculator, acquired a great land from England, a 2 million-acre tract of land in the Catskills. As the country moved toward independence, loyalties to the country or to England were divided. Owners of the Hardborough land traveled, favored a revolution, and mostly because they feared the British would confiscate their properties. The region's growing population of tenant farmers wanting to retaliate against their landlords supported the British. New York was declared an independent state in July 1776. The state constitution was to be ratified in New York City, but the New York area had become increasingly dangerous with shiploads of British soldiers arriving. The provincial Congress decided to write and approve the Constitution in a quiet country home to to wheat farmers. The town of Kingston in Ulster County was where the Constitution was signed. Now, this is Washington. Washington Irving, known for the legend of Sleepy Hollow, Rip Van Winkle migrated from New York to the Catskills at the age of 15. Because of ill health, he spent 17 years in England, where he began his literary career. Rip Van Winkle. The story of Rip Van Winkle was actually written in England, but its setting was from Irving's impressions of the magical Catskill Mountains. Washington Irving helped popularize the rustic settings of the Catskills. Early 18th century artists, many who came from Europe, were captivated by the beauty of the landscapes of the Catskills. Thomas Cole, then a starving artist, always wanted to explore the Catskill area. From the proceeds of his first 4 sales, he made a sketching trip to the Catskills. His landscape paintings of the Catskills proved to be very popular, and the cost to purchase one kept climbing. Washington Irving's stories greatly influenced Cole's work. Now we're going back to how the Catskills became a playground. From this ball, if you recall back there, the Catskill Mountain Association was formed. The Mountain House Hotel was built in the fall and winter of 1823, and this luxurious hotel opened in the summer of 1824. The owners of the Catskill Mountain House catered to the Christian rich and famous. For 50 years, the Mountain House became the unchallenged queen of the nation's hotels. The owners of the Catskill Mountain House catered to the Christian rich and famous, and they were the unchallenged queen of the nation's hotels. The guests not only came to view the glorious landscapes, but they came for adventure. They didn't stay for a day, they were there for 2 or 3 weeks, or even a month. By 1890, Catskill Mountain House room rate at the height of the season topped out at $24.50 a week, which would be about $630 today. The trek from the steamboat by stagecoach took 4 to 5 hours, traveling over steep mountain paths to reach the hotel. Nevertheless, upon arriving at the hotel, the guests were enchanted by the beauty and grandeur before them. Activities at the Mountain House included climbing rocks, which was which was very risky endeavor. There was excitement in experiencing the wilderness and even being threatened by it. There were bears and wolves in the surrounding area, so there was danger just being out away from the hotel. The Mountain House guest roster contained the names of William Cullen Bryant, James Fenimore Cooper, Daniel Webster, and the actor Tyrone Power. After a shaky financial start, by the mid 1800s, new owners managed to right itself, and the hotel remained open for 50 years. Fresh meat and fish were imported by steamboat daily from New York, and this impressed the agreeable and refined society. The Mountain House was the self-reliant, for the bakery made all the breads and pastries, the extensive gardens provided fresh fruits and vegetables, and the cows provided the dairy products. A house orchestra provided music for dances and formal balls, and the glimmering lights in the windows gave off a magical aura. Jews were not welcomed at the Mountain House. It was rather anti-Semitic. After 50 years, the Mountain House was sold again and purchased by a Jewish family. Jews could not now enjoy the splendor of the scenic Catskill Mountains. Because of the dense forests, a leather tanning business with the cooperation of the Native Americans thrived for a while in the Catskills. Soon, tenant farmers leased land from the Hardenberg family, and there was much dissension by the renters. The mob became involved, and things became violent, with many people murdered. Starting in the 19th century, immigrants from Eastern Europe came to America to escape anti Semitism, pogroms, and poverty. Most of these immigrants settled in the Lower East Side of New York City. As the 20th century dawned, more Jewish immigrants arrived and settled on the Lower East Side. The area was dirty, overcrowded, and a host to many poverty-stricken Jews. Some of these immigrants were farmers in their home country and could not tolerate the conditions in the city. So they migrated to the mountains, to the Catskill Mountains, where the air was fresh and clean and the soil fertile. Here we have the farmers. They traveled by foot or by horse and wagon, and later on they took stagecoaches. The men who were farmers would leave their wives and children on the farm for the winter while they went back to New York, take any job that was available, and came back whenever they could. Sometimes they were away for the whole winter and would return in the summer. While in the city, some of these farmers would make contacts and brought these people to summer in the country. They rented rooms in their farmhouses, and that is how they made ends meet. These boarders would schlep not only their clothing, but their cooking utensils, sheets, mattresses, pillows, quilts, and an assortment of other things, including toilet paper. All they got for their money was a place to sleep. The women had to cook their own meals in the community kitchen. Can you imagine a group of Jewish women all trying to cook their own meal at the same time? It had to be a circus. These boarding farmhouses became known as kochalanes or cookalone, as it is in English. It, the renters also had to do their own cleaning, and the children often helped on the farm. The boarders, in addition to sharing one kitchen, also had to share bathtubs and outhouses. It was all worth it for the fresh air, strolls along the mountain paths, and berry picking were all the activity they needed. Some of these boarding houses were a haven for people with tuberculosis. At that time, it was felt that the best cure for TB was fresh, clean air that could only be found in the mountains. The towns of Parksville, Ferndale, and Liberty were of higher elevation than most of Sullivan County. The town of Liberty was known for its sanatorium, and this is a picture of the TB sanatorium in Liberty, New York. The hotels wanted nothing to do with the stigma of TB, so they distanced themselves from the towns. Bungalow colonies. Some of these boarding houses expanded into clusters of cottages called colonies, which were also called kochalanes. With the hotels and bungalow colonies, Sullivan and Ulster counties were flourishing with New York City vacationers. For the European Jews, vacations were a novel concept, an American idea to a population who had been historically impoverished and oppressed. However, as Americans, the Jews began reveling and enjoying their newfound freedom. The Catskill resorts reflected the change in attitude. In the early days, nostalgic reminders of der alte Heim, the old country, were enough. Berry picking, a lake, or a pond for swimming and boating was all the recreation they needed. Later, games learned in the city, streets, or in the schoolyard, such as handball, basketball, and baseball, were transplanted to the Catskills. Entertainers bridged the transition from the old world to the new with a repertoire of both Yiddish and American songs and inside Yiddish humor. In the Catskills, Jewish culture was making an impact on American life, and American life was making an impact on Jewish culture. The bungalow colonies were one step up the social ladder. Bungalows were usually arranged in a semicircle around a common area. And the bungalow itself consisted of a kitchen and a bedroom, no living room, but there often was a screened-in porch. The colony provided a playground for children, a social hall, and a small store for groceries and other necessities. The surroundings were safe. There were no locks on the doors, and there was no heat. Some fancier bungalows had a swimming pool. There's a picture of the swimming pool, um, which served as a social center during the day. Those without a pool took their children to the nearest pond or lake to swim. There wasn't much to be had in recreation. Everyone had to find something to amuse her or himself. Ladies played a lot of mahjong, and when the men came up for the weekend, pinochle was their game of choice. In the evenings, the residents had to improvise their own entertainment. Mock weddings where a man would play the bride and a woman the groom, of course in full costume, were popular at the time. Occasionally, on the weekend, an entertainer, after completing a gig at various hotels, would end up the night at a bungalow colony. It wasn't unusual for the show to start at 2 a.m. This is more bungalow colonies. Small hotels were the next step up, with some of them eventually becoming grand resorts. By the 1950s, the destination of choice for a vacation for middle class New York Jews was the Catskill Hotel Resort. Many were family owned hotels, such as Grossinger's. Oh, got a little mixed up here. Grossinger's, famous of the Catskill upscale hotels. The smaller hotels, also mostly owned by families, usually resided on about 200 acres, a main building with a porch, a dining room, a swimming pool, and a casino, which was not a place to gamble, but a place to enjoy much entertainment and dance. As the smaller hotels attracted more guests, many expanded by adding more guest rooms, provided a day camp for children, some added handball courts, and a few may have had a tennis court. Competition among the hotels was intense. If one put in an elevator, another one would put in two elevators. If one installed a pool, another would install a larger pool. The one thing that had no competition was the food. Mostly every hotel served only kosher food and plenty of it. Borscht and sour cream were staples. That's how the area became known as the Borscht Belt. One of the staff of the hotel I visited every summer said that the white line down Route 17 was really sour cream. The cuisine was mostly old-style Jewish food, recipes brought here from the old country. There were always a variety of choices at each meal. One could order anything from the menu or everything from the menu. The breakfast menu featured every variety of fruit juice, melon, stewed prunes, a selection of hot cereals and cold cereals, um, lox, herring, pickled, fried, or matchas, made to order any way you wanted. Pancakes and the most delicious selection of freshly baked rolls, including onion rolls and bagels. Of course, coffee, tea, hot chocolate, milk, or hot water with lemon topped off the first meal of the day. Everyone was so stuffed that the only thing they could do is sit on the porch in a rocking chair or sit on the lawn chair and enjoy the sun's rays. Before our guests could completely digest the breakfast, it was time for lunch. Here is an example of a lunch menu. Oh, these are more small hotels. There's the lunch menu. This is from the Laurels Hotel and Country Club, which by the 1960s was considered the hippiest hotel in the Catskills. The menu consisted of chilled apricot nectar, Heart's Delight grapefruit juice, Dole pineapple juice, cream of tomato soup, cold borscht and boiled potato, broiled mushroom saute, cheese blintzes and sour cream, garden vegetable plate, onion omelet. Plus, cold suggestions, smoked whitefish salad combination, blueberries and sour cream, American cheese and crackers. Desserts, victory cake, raisin cake, plain pound cake, marble slice, and of course, beverages, coffee, tea, and milk. The dinner menu was even more elaborate than the lunch one. It usually featured a juice or melon for starters, 3 different appetizers, such as chopped liver and gefilte fish, 3 soup choices, salad, 5 entrees, and 5 desserts. There was always a relish dish on the table with dill pickles, sour tomatoes, celery, olives, and whatever else they could think of that day. Can you imagine someone eating everything on the menu? I actually have seen that. Some people just want to get their money's worth. Although I mentioned the Laurels, it was a random choice because every hotel in the Borscht Belt, large and small, had similar menus each day. Mel Z. Lawrence, a once popular comedian who traveled the Borscht Belt circuit, used the dining room scene for one of his routines. It went like this. You know it's lunch because they see other people are beginning to move. In the dining room, people who haven't read a newspaper in years begin to study the menu. Apple juice, apple juice. Who wants apple juice? Apple juice, tomato juice. Who wants? What kind of juice do you want? Who wants shav? Who wants shav? Want shav? You want borscht? Potato? No potato. 1 potato, 2 potato. Garni. What is garni? Did you ever eat garni? Jellied yellow pike? Ugh. The more you read, the less you know what you want. People are really confused now. They look at each other in desperation. They say the same thing at every table. What are you going to eat? You want to share something? Come on, we'll split something. I'll have half of yours, you'll have half of mine. Because really, I couldn't eat the whole thing. And then there's for later. These are for later, these danishes. No, these are not for now. They are for later. We'll have them with coffee on November 23rd. While on the subject of the dining room, I must mention the waiters and busboys. They were all college students working for the summer to pay their tuition for college. Their accommodations, more often than not, were a lot less than desirable. Some hotel owners converted chicken coops to accommodate the dining staff. Some waiters and busboys would court the daughters of the people at their table with hopes of getting a large tip from their parents. The waiters asked the teenage girls to help them clean up after dinner and set up for breakfast the next day so that they could get through with their work in time to go to the casino to see the entertainment, but mainly to dance with the girls. I can definitely say that the humor of the waiters and busboys, their impersonations of the guests, were many times funnier than the featured comedian. This is proven because a good many of the popular comedians, such as Mel Brooks, Sid Caesar, Robert Klein, and Jerry Lewis, cut their comic teeth working as waiters or busboys in the Catskills. Next to the food, the entertainment rated second, unless, of course, there was someone famous booked. Every hotel, large and small, had a resident orchestra and resident dance teachers. Usually, the smaller hotels got the lesser known comedians, but they were very much enjoyed, especially when they told Yiddish jokes and sang Yiddish songs. Many of their routines were directed to the foibles of the Jews. Today, it would be called self hate or anti Semitism, but then it made the guests laugh at themselves. The dance teachers taught the mambo, the cha cha cha, rumba, and tango, which were in vogue at the time. When I was 9 years old, my father decided my mother and I needed a vacation since we were both recovering from surgery. Because he traveled the Northeast for business purposes, he became familiar with the Jewish resorts in the Catskills. We took off for a 2 week vacation without having any hotel reservations. Our first stop was the Concord, which was very impressive, even to a 9-year-old. Unfortunately, they didn't have a room for us, but they told my father to try a hotel down the road. He did that, and we discovered Hotel Gibber in Kiamisha Lake. Gibbers became our vacation destination for many years after that. With the exception of 4 years during World War II, we spent 2 weeks every summer at Hotel Gibber from when I was 14 years old to 18 years old. Later, after we felt our children were old enough, we spent Rosh Hashanah with my parents at Gibbers. Even though I was young, I got quite an education as a guest at Gibbers. The first year, when I was 14, I met quite a few teenage girls from the New York area and New Jersey. There were no teenage boy guests. The first thing I learned that I wasn't in the Catskills, but in the country. All the New Yorkers called the Catskills the country. The second thing I learned was that I had a peculiar accent. Most of the guests and staff had never even known upstate New York. Uh, I don't know if they thought my accent was cute or they were making fun of me. The third thing I learned that was my wardrobe was too juvenile and not in style. My dresses were too short. The new look hadn't yet come to Rochester. In other words, I was a hick from some unknown place. Most of my Gibber friends didn't even know where Rochester was located. Every summer, I had a different summer romance. My first summer, when I was 14, our busboy asked me to go to the movies with him. Oh my God, I actually had a date with a college boy. My last summer, when I was 18, my summer romance lasted the whole year with plans to get married. That lasted until I met the man of my dreams, my husband. The fourth thing I learned is that there was a lot of hanky-panky going on. The husband would bring the family to the country for a vacation. After the weekend, he'd leave his family behind and go back to the city. But suddenly, the wives would become swingers. They were looking for young guys and they became hip. Come Friday, the wives' hair went up in curlers in preparation for their husband's arrival late Friday afternoon. Suddenly, they turned back into nice, doting, loving housewives again. God knows what the husbands were doing in the city while their wives were away on vacation. That's a picture of the staff at Grossinger's, I believe. And this is Grossinger's, the early Grossinger's. So far, I've been focusing on the smaller hotels, most of them family owned. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the most elaborate hotels, Grossinger's on the Concord. Selig Grossinger and his wife Jenny started their life in the Catskills as farmers and invited boarders to spend their summers in their farmhouse. As the renters increased, the farmhouse could not accommodate all who wanted to be guests of the Grossingers. Selig purchased land in Ferndale, New York, and opened a small hotel. And that's the small hotel. As more guests chose to stay at Grossinger's Hotel, Selig added more buildings, hired more staff, built a nightclub, expanded the dining room. Here's the dining room. Hired a social director known as a tumbler, added handball courts, tennis courts, an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Oh, there's Jenny Grossinger. And of course, a golf course, plus many more amenities. Jenny became the hostess with the mostest, greeting each guest upon arrival and creating a welcome high-class hotel. The dining room and food was not much different than in the smaller hotels. Everything was strictly kosher. The food was the most important aspect at Grossinger's. However, their claim to fame was the first class entertainment. Popular performers frequented Grossinger's, and Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher were married at Grossinger, as was his marriage to Elizabeth Taylor. Social director Lou Goldstein, uh, his job was to keep the guests busy during the day. Simon Says was very popular at Grossinger's because the social director had a fun and unique way of playing it. The Tumler's job was to keep the guests entertained. He was the MC for all the shows, was to keep the many tumblers who got their start at Grossinger's became successful comedians. The shows at Grossinger's were always first class. This is the Terrace Lounge at Grossinger's that was very popular for singles weekends. Grossinger's was also noted for its singles weekends. What better place to find a match than Grossinger's? I don't want to give you the impression that Grossinger's was the only hotel that catered to singles. The Laurels and Tamarack Lodge also attracted a young crowd, many of whom were looking for someone to marry, not with someone with whom to sleep. Woody Allen in the movie The Front checks into a Catskill hotel and is asked by a young woman what he does. I'm a writer, he answers, prompting her to run away as fast as her little legs could carry her. Later, another woman asks the same question, only this time he is wiser and answers, I'm a dentist. Immediately, the woman pulls her chair closer and thoughtfully asks, Are you staying long? Besides eating and laughing yourself silly, there was a good possibility for making a match, not necessarily for themselves, but for their children or sister or aunt, especially from among the available medical and law students on the staff. This is an aerial view of the Concord. Next to Grossinger's of the more elite hotels was the Concord. Arthur Winerick purchased the Ideal Plaza in 1935 and named his hotel the Concord. Winerick, a Russian immigrant, became a millionaire, having made his fortune from Jerish hair tonic, a mainstay of the nation's barbershops. To the Winerick, bigger was better. These are a couple of the lobbies at um, at the Concord. He built 1,500 guest rooms on his 2,000 acres with a 9-story main building. The dining room seated 3,000 people. To compete with Grossinger's, which boasted artificial snow for summer skiing, Eric added ice caps tinted in hot pink. In 1959, when Eric inaugurated his Coliseum-sized Imperial nightclub, the opening act was Milton Berle. Grossinger's catered to the more Orthodox Jews. The Concord was more reform and flashier. After the Miami Beach Fontainebleau opened in 1954, Eric hired his architect to redo the Concord in similarly ornate fashion. Because Jenny Grossinger's pool cost $1.5 million, Eric spent $2 million on a new pool and hired Tarzan star Buster Crabbe to be his swimming instructor. Is that the pool, I guess? The Concord was now well known for its entertainment. In its prime, mostly big stars entertained at the Concord. Some of the funniest comedians got their start at the Concord. Buddy Hackett was a mainstay there when he first started out. We went to the Concord for our honeymoon. One night, all the honeymooners were invited to the ski chalet for special entertainment and refreshments. Buddy Hackett, long before he became famous, was the entertainment, and he was hilarious. All sorts of celebrities spent time at the Concord. Actors, musicians, singers, politicians, and well-known sports figures also frequented this hotel, whether they were entertaining or being a guest. Gloria, when Eric's, when Eric's when Arthur's daughter commented that you could sit at one table in the nightclub and at the next table sat Robert Goulet, the mayor of New York City, and Lucille Ball and Gary Morton, her husband. Oh, I got a little mixed up here. This is Buster Crabbe at the pool with a bunch of kids. I can't see what this is exactly. Oh, I know what that is. Okay. When Eric went for the most famous stars, Judy Garland, Marlene Dietrich, Tony Martin, and Maurice Chevalier performed there. Perry Como frequented the Monster Golf Course. Guests could go home and brag that they saw these famous entertainers, and to prove their point, display their autograph menu that the celebrities willingly sound. This is the nightclub at the Concord. This is Lucille Ball and Gary Morton enjoying the Concord. This is Bob Hope. And I don't know, I think that's Maurice Chevalier down there. And Toady Fields. Okay. So many top entertainers and comedians cut their teeth not only at Grocers of the Concord, but at many other hotels in the Catskills. Mel Brooks said Caesar, Danny Kaye, Jerry Lewis, Joan Rivers, Robert Klein, and a slew of other credit the Catskill hotels for their future success. My husband and I took the kids for a weekend at Gibbers. Our friends were staying at the Pines Hotel, a couple steps higher than Gibbers, and they invited us uh, to the show there on Saturday. Ella Fitzgerald was the featured entertainment. We went to the Pines and had a nice evening. The next morning, we were told that we missed the best show ever. Toady Fields entertained at Gibbers. I guess you can't win everything. Now, this is a ticket to Woodstock. The village of Woodstock, located in the Catskill Mountains, is a place of little cottages on green hills. In the late 1940s, folk musicians moved in, and in later years, the town served as a home to Joan Baez and the trio, Peter, Paul, and Mary. In the mid 60s, Bob Dylan bought an out of the way mountaintop retreat. With all these music superstars in the vicinity, a horde of hippies descended on the town. That's Woodstock, and that also is Woodstock. There were um, There were communes organized around the selling of clothing, handmade jewelry, drug paraphernalia, and so on. People started driving from all over the area to look at the hippies and the flower children. These kids smoked their drugs while hanging out on the village green. Some were weirdly dressed, the girls in granny dresses and big plumed hats, the boys often with unkempt, bushy beards. The locals, mostly businessmen, declared war against the hippies. The organizers attracted practically every known popular folk singer to perform, which encouraged thousands of young people to travel to Woodstock and the Catskills. I'm not going to go into what occurred during the weekend of August 15th because the antics of the crowd were in every newspaper and pontificated by every news commentator. Let's just say it's all a part of Catskill history. As a postscript to Woodstock, one of the reasons this area was chosen for the festival is that it was far enough away from the Jewish resorts. Oh, that's another Woodstock character. Okay. I don't want you to think that the Catskill Mountains only contain Jewish resorts. Other ethnic groups had their own hotels also, but in other areas of the mountains. In some respects, the crime scene we associate with Las Vegas first took shape in the Catskills. History professor Jonathan Sarna said, "Whatever happens in the Catskills stays in the Catskills." There were all sorts of stories about men who had mistresses in the Catskills and participated in a lot of hanky-panky there, but were upstanding citizens in the city. There was a code of silence that may have been why certain Jewish criminals were attracted to the Catskills. Prohibition was the impetus that fueled crime in the mountains. Because of the wild nature and remoteness of Catskill roads, ponds, and caves, the underworld found utopia. People in Sullivan County remarked that many undiscovered bodies were wired to concrete blocks or scraps of metal still lie at the bottom of the lakes. There's another. Yeah. The mountains were a good place to hide, create stills, and store bootleg liquor. Legs Diamond controlled the Hudson River area. Dutch Schultz controlled Ulster County, and Waxy Gordon was active in Sullivan County. Among the hotels, the President at Swan Lake and the Ambassador in Fallsburg were especially friendly to the gangsters. The Plaza in South Falls, the Plaza in South Fallsburg served as a summer home to the mother of Murder Incorporated boss Louis Lepke Buchhalter. The Evans Hotel in Loch Sheldrake always seemed to be involved in the mob hits. The one thing about these gangsters is that they were perfect gentlemen during their stays at the hotels. Most of the Jewish hotels had some kind of concessions, some as simple as renting out boats, card games, um, eventually including pinball machines and slot machines. I remember as a 9-year-old my father taking me into a closet at Gibbers to show me a slot machine and how it worked. The millionaire gangsters demanded payment on a regular basis from the concessionaires. They didn't discriminate between the larger hotels, such as Grossinger's, and the smaller hotels. Much has been written about these Jewish gangsters, and many films have memorialized them. Getting Getting back to the golden age of the Borscht Belt, what happened to this Jewish playland? First of all, a good portion of the elderly guests either died or were too infirm to travel to the Catskills. There were many other factors that contributed to the demise of the Jewish Alps: assimilation, prosperity, the decline of anti Semitism as a result of the Civil Rights Act. Hotels could no longer be restricted, so Jews could vacation at any hotel of their choice. The older, loyal guests had either died or were too infirm to travel to the country. The younger generation did not want anything to do with the Jewish Catskills. They preferred to vacation in more exotic places, and the move to the suburbs and air conditioning no longer made it necessary to flee to the mountains for fresh air. Changes in dietary habits also contributed to this demise. People were more health conscious and didn't want to eat the high fat, high calorie diets of the Catskill Mountains. The smaller hotels were the first to feel the decline. Many of them went bankrupt, and others just closed their doors. Around 1966, articles started appearing about the number of hotels in Sullivan County that were closing down or changing from traditional resorts to campgrounds. Many of the established hotels were now more than half a century old and expensive to maintain. Staffing also became a problem because college students who worked in the dining rooms of the Catskill hotels to earn money for their college education were no longer interested in working in the Catskills. By the 1960s, many of these students' parents had become more affluent, so they could now afford the tuition. As vacancies rose, competition intensified. Clinging to the old adage that bigger is better, dining rooms and nightclubs were enlarged. Tennis courts, handball courts, and indoor swimming pools were added. The hotel of my family's choice did exactly that. They even added an ice skating rink. In some cases, smaller hotels uh, bank, became bankrupt themselves, just trying to keep up. In desperation to fill the more than 12,000 rooms that were available every night, new tricks were tried and traditions shattered. After more than 70 years of adhering to kosher dietary laws, the Nevele Hotel started serving bacon at breakfast, shrimp cocktail at lunch, and creamy lobster thermidor at dinner. Some of the hotels followed suit and gave up their kosher cuisine. Single adults no longer were interested in meeting a spouse at a Catskill hotel. Online dating was cheaper and easier. Throughout the region, dozens of bungalow colonies were shut down and abandoned, leaving only weeds and moss to fill their swimming pools. I think you can see all. These are what was. The first to go were the bungalow colonies. Um, Then the smaller hotels, with some of the larger and fancier hotels hanging in the longest. The signs of death could be seen all along Route 17. The white lines were no longer made of sour cream, just paint. Now, what's left of this once vibrant vacation utopia? The once Flagler Hotel, after a few incarnations, was sold to a Hasidic sect. The Laurels, once Sullivan County's largest hotel, was closed down in the 1970s because of a foreclosure action. After many attempts by new owners to revitalize the hotel, the acreage serves as the home to several wild migratory birds. Brown's was sold at a foreclosure auction in 1988, and within a few years was converted into a condominium complex called Grandview Place. Facing many violations, including the fire code, the Grandview burned down the night of April 14th, 2012. The old Tamarack Lodge also succumbed to a fire. Some hotels became ashram yoga places, and a great many of the smaller hotels are now inhabited by various sects of Hasidim. The Catskills offered them a place where they could go either seasonally or permanently, where there were other Jews like them, were isolated and separated from the rest of the world. Um, to these Hasidic Jews, the forests, lakes, and glorious landscapes of the Catskills are incidental benefits. Today, you won't find ladies in shorts or short dresses, or men in t shirts, or even children dressed differently on the streets of Monticello, Liberty, and South Fallsburg. Today, the streets are filled with men in long black coats, black hats, and long beards. The women with their hair covered with a sheitel, a wig, more often than not, are flanked with a number of children in strollers or at their mother's heels. The boys all wear kippot or yarmulkes, as they are known in Yiddish, and have short hair but long sideburns. The girls are wearing long dresses and tights. I imagine they must be very uncomfortable on a hot summer's day. The culture of the Catskills, though very different now than when we knew it, will not be forgotten, because many books, such as Herman Wouk's Marjorie Morningstar, and many movies, such as Dirty Dancing and Sweet Lorraine, will still remind our generation of the golden years of the Catskills, and the younger generation just might be curious enough to read these books or rent a film. I have given you an overlook of a time past, actually an era. No matter how many books, movies, or Netflix series one encounters, unless you have actually been there and experienced the culture of the Borscht Belt, you won't really fully understand it. And azoy geht es in English, and so it goes. And thank you very much. Anybody have any questions or comments or whatever? Yes? Yeah. Well, upstate New York didn't really know much about the Catskills until the big hotels became very popular. It was mainly the smaller hotels. I don't know where the light switch is that she